I'm Lisa Maricosis, founder of Global One Health and Global One Fitness. In this video, I'm going to introduce animal flow, and this will be the first video in a number of videos in this series, as it is quite an extensive movement form. So I want to address the basics here, and then we will progress from there. So what is animal flow? The creator, Mike Fitch, has said it's really an integration of various body weight training disciplines. He doesn't profess to have created something new, but kind of molded together different principles from yoga, from gymnastics, martial arts, obviously animal type movement patterns. But he brought all these different modalities and movements together to create what he calls animal flow. And it is a fantastic body weight training. So animal flow, one of the biggest benefits about it is that you do not need any equipment whatsoever. Right? All you need is your body and a floor space, and you can do animal flow basically anywhere. So body weight training is fantastic because it is strengthening all of the structures of the body to be able to work together in unison and use the ground as resistance, and learning how to move on the ground, especially as we age. We want to be able to get up and down from the ground with ease, with comfort, and have a good ability to do so. Especially if we fall, we need to be able to learn how to move on the ground and get up from there. So it is a basic premise. It is extremely functional, and I think it's one of the best forms of movement that you can do. Mike Fitch does not like to think of it as a workout, but more as a practice, as in martial arts would be considered kind of the same thing, just to be done on a daily basis or throughout your week, just to improve many, many different things in the body. So what are the benefits of animal flow? Definitely joint mobility, right? It works to improve the mobility of your joint structures. You are weight bearing, so you are definitely going to improve the stability of those joint structures as well. There is movement and length involved, so you're going to get increased flexibility of the soft tissues in the body, the soft tissue structures. You also will get a cardiovascular benefit, as you are going to improve your strength and your endurance as well. But another aspect of it is the neuromuscular conditioning that you're going to get, right? Anytime you do cross-body patterning, you are training the brain to be more involved and integrated. So you will improve your neuromuscular efficiency as well, which again is very important as we get older. We want to be strengthening and targeting and thinking about our nervous system and improving those synapse connections in our body. So I think animal flow is also fantastic for that. Now, before we get into the movement itself, I do want to quickly address the first component, or one of the 6 components of animal flow, and that is your wrist mobilizations. You're going to be doing a tremendous amount of weight bearing on the arms and the hands and wrist joints. Therefore, you want to warm up those structures first. And this is actually the first component that is talked about in the Animal Flow Level 1 certification. So let's do the wrist mobilizations, and then we'll progress from there. So you're going to interlock your fingers so you can see a bit better from the side view. Right, you're going to interlock your fingers, and you're simply going to do a figure 8 type pattern in the wrist joints. Now, you can do it slowly and methodically. You can do them quickly, but I always recommend start out slow. Try to get activation, right, in the musculature of the forearm. So instead of just thinking of randomly just moving the wrists in a circular pattern, you want to try to feel like you're activating, in my opinion, getting a little bit nice sense of muscle activation in the forearm muscles, right, throughout the different structures, right, the top, the underneath, the pinky and thumb side, right. So getting that muscle activation will help improve your mobility benefit. Now, so you also then want to do that in the opposite direction. So you're going to take that figure 8 type pattern in both directions. So that's the first one. The second one that we can do is we're going to now open up. We keep the fingers interlocked, and you're going to go ahead and press and reach forward, right? So you can do it with the palms facing out. Also classic is the palms facing the ground, right? So now you're going to get a nice stretch on that lateral side of your wrist area, right? So interlocked fingers, you're trying to contract the thumb side of the forearms and press forward just from a down angle. I'm pressing my hands away from my trunk, trying to keep the palms facing the ground. We will also do the wave, right? So the wave is this pattern. So now I'm going to be strengthening the underneath sides of my forearm and stretching, right? So if I stretch the top side of my forearm, I'm strengthening the underneath side, right? So I want to be in this position, kind of trying to get to like a 90-degree angle, but again, not forcing it, right? And then you kind of push down through, and then you lift up. So you're going to have the top of one wrist reaching to the ceiling, the underneath side of the wrist, if I separate my hands for a moment so you can see, reaching towards the ground, right? So I do this pattern of thinking up through the one wrist and down through the other. So I'm leading, this is my left arm, your right, so I'm going to be leading with that side up, and then I reverse, and now I'm going to be leading more with the opposite side of the top of the wrist structure. So this is the wave. Okay, and then the last one we're going to target is pronation, supination. So we're hitting all 6 angles or positions that the wrist joint can move into, right? So if I'm in this position, which is where all of my weight bearing is, this is wrist extension. The opposite is flexion. So after doing a tremendous amount of weight bearing on the hands, you will often come to this flexed wrist position to stretch the muscle tissue and soft tissue structures of that side of the wrist after doing weight bearing. So this is a go-to stretch to do. Notice my shoulders are not upright. My shoulders are relaxed. My elbows are just relaxed as well. And I'm gently pressing the tops of my hands into each other to stretch out that side of the wrist structure. Highly recommend that you do that periodically in between your animal flow practice, or during the animal flow practice, in between your different movements. So the last one, right, we've talked about extension and flexion. We also have when you're doing this stretch with the palms facing the ground, right? So that's this movement, right? So that is radial ulnar deviation. That's moving towards your thumb, right? Your thumb and the pinky side of your forearm. And the last one is pronation, supination, which is the rotation. So just like our body moves in 3 planes of movement, we have 3 planes that the hand and wrist joint are moving in, right? So pronation, palms are facing the ground. Supination, palms face up. I'm not moving at my shoulders or elbows. I'm simply rotating the forearm bones, palms up, supination, and down, pronation. So those are the wrist mobilizations that you should do before you do your animal flow practice. It is a great warm-up for the wrist joint structures, and I very much recommend it. And that's something that we all do in our animal flow practice before we start flowing. So now, the very next component of animal flow is going to be activation. So once you've warmed up the wrist joint structures, the very next thing you do early on in your practice is you do the activations. The purpose of activations is they are done in a static position, so you're not moving around in space, so you're not thinking about a movement pattern. You're simply thinking about, activating the muscle structures and creating a sense of stability, connection to the ground, stability and stabilization of the joint structures, because you need to turn on the muscles and have the body working, right? And have the brain, right? That central nervous system is now talking to the joints and the muscles to say, activate, turn on. I need you to be engaged to do the work presently, and also be able to have the body be prepared for the movement that is about to follow, right? So if you can do an exercise, right, stability is always your first component. That's why I talked about activation of the core with breathing, learning how to engage your core and stabilize your trunk and spine before you start putting the body under load or doing more complicated advanced movements, right? It's turning on the body to get it ready to do what you are going to give it in the next few minutes or hour of your workout, right? So stabilizations are the very next component. I'm going to talk about beast and crab activations in this video, which is just the beginning. As I mentioned, it's quite a fantastic practice. And then once you learn how to do your stabilizations, then you take them into movement, that's crawling, right? And then you take them into stretches and traveling movement patterns, and then you can progress to the flow, which is really the more advanced aspect of animal flow. So let's do the activations in beast. Now, my last video, I talked about GFEs for 6-point and 4-point cross lift and crawl. You're going to see a very, very direct overlap between these two certifying organizations in their movement pattern and in their premise. As Mike Fitch says, in Animal Flow, I didn't create this. It's a collaboration of different body weight patterns. So crawling is crawling, right? We have slightly different technique from different organizations, have a different approach to crawling. But at any point, we've all crawled, right? As I mentioned, we've crawled before we walked. So you will see crawling used in different modalities or in different certifying organizations. So there is a slight difference, and we'll talk about that. But The activations are done with the knees off the ground, so that's why it's good to practice. But the regressed variation of crawling in animal flow is 6-point as well, right? So the activations now you're going to do, again, I talked about the hand position, and they talk about that in animal flow as well, right? Using the hands and the fingers in the ground is very important. So again, you want to get your setup of your position is important. So now we're not going to be in that kind of classic, hips over knees, shoulders over wrist stack position for the beast activation. You notice I'm a little bit shifted back. What does this look like, right? The original strength rocking, right? Position, right? So everything overlaps, right? So at the end of the day, it's various modalities will have commonalities. So understand that, and that is what makes it wonderful, is that you can combine these modalities to get stronger and improve your mobility, flexibility, and stability, right? So beast activation, I do want my shoulders lined up over my wrists, so I have that nice vertical load of the upper extremities, right? We grip the floor, right? We drive ourselves away from the ground by driving the arms actively into the ground. We do want to corkscrew, that is talked about as an important aspect of the weight bearing and animal flow as well. You want to actively corkscrew, which is external rotation of your humeral bones up into your socket. Now notice I need to be in dorsiflex position. I can't be up weight bearing with my toes in plantar flexion. So feet dorsiflexed. Again, I try to really get as much bend in the front of the ankle as I can. And notice my thigh bone angle is slightly on a diagonal, so my pelvis is more over my lower leg than over my knees for the beast activation. Beast is loading core, the core musculature, and the quads are probably the most noticeable, of course, all the muscles of the shoulders. But the beast activation is a static isometric hold of your 4-point position. I grip the floor, I corkscrew, core is engaged, I'm pressing my hands and my feet down. I lift my knees. Now, I'm going to lift a little higher just for the second, right? I lift my knees up, but it is not to get my pelvis in line or my sacrum in line with my shoulders. It is literally, according to the specifics in the certification, a sheet of paper. So you're not lifting your knees up inches off the ground. That technically is not form specific to animal flow, okay? So you want to lift your knees literally, according to the cert, a sheet of paper off the ground, which is very hard to see with the carpet, but that is the goal, sheet of paper. Now, the basic beast activation is I just hold this position. So I teach my clients this initially, and I time them. So the goal is we're trying to increase muscle endurance, right? The ability to maintain a contraction in the musculature for an extended period of time is the official definition of muscular endurance. So I'm trying to build endurance, right? So isometrically, because I'm not moving my body, right? There's muscle activation, but there's no movement pattern happening. So the goal is that you hold a position as long as you can. Start with 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and increase it. Then when you get good, you set your timer and you see if you can increase your hold time, right? So that is how you do the basic beast activation. Then, and one key thing, when we're talking about building endurance and doing isometric holds for time, yes, the goal is you want to build endurance and hold as long as you can, but only if you maintain the integrity of the form and the position. If you don't, holding it is a waste of your time, and then your muscle memory is remembering bad form, and you don't want to train that way. It's not healthy, it's not safe, and it's not ideal, right? So maximum hold time is great, maintaining form position. If you start to you start to collapse into your shoulders, you're not supporting your shoulder capsules properly. Bring the knees down. If you're in planking, you start to arch the back too much, or you start leaning to one side. It is not worth staying in the position once you've lost form. That is a very important point I wanted to just address. So basic activation, the knees come off. Now, if that is a little bit easy, the beast activation progression is then you take to 6-point, 4-point down to 3-point. So I'm going to take one foot, again, just an inch off the floor, right? And then I would do the other foot. So again, the key is I don't want to shift from side to side. I don't take a foot off and then I'm leaning out, right? I've talked about that in a couple other videos. So I won't you can refer back to some other ones about the strengthening of the hip structure will help minimize shifting. And some of the other, the bird dog variation, I talk about the importance of that. So you can check out those videos to get into more detail about that. So that's why I do those videos first, or posted those first, so that you have those basics So your body is now prepared and your mind knows what to do to now start to progress into these activations from animal flow. So we've gone from 6 to 4 point, now at 5 point, taking one foot off, then the other foot off. Again, sheet of paper. Now, that is the easiest variation of the beast activation. To start with is 1 foot off. Then, if that is easy and you can own that position nicely and hold it for a bit of time, you then add or transition to, instead of lifting 1 foot off, you lift up one hand. Just, again, slightly off the floor, right? But no shifting. The single hand variation is more challenging, so you want to start with the single leg first, then progress to single arm, right? Now, if you can own this position of single hand, then you progress to hand and foot in the activation. Again, all the activations are static. You are not moving in space or traveling in any direction, simply staying in one spot. So you don't need a lot of room to do these drills, which is fantastic. And they're really good strengthening exercise drills. So now, again, focus on not so much getting the hand up, but how much can you drive the down arm down into the ground and the feet and legs. So if you can own the variation of now lifting up one hand, as I mentioned, the very next sequence in this pattern is one hand and 1 foot. Coming up, one hand, 1 foot. Now, one very important premise when you put that drill, when you do this drill and you put those two movements together of lifting the hand and the foot at the same time, you want, and this is again very specific with the certification, it's not a random just you lift up the hand and foot at any old time, right? So you don't want to do it hand, foot, right? The timing is actually a very important component of that beast activation drill. You want to lift the hand and foot up at the same time and that you put them down on the ground at the same time. That is a very specific component you want to be mindful of. So I'm going to lift up one hand, 1 foot at the same time. I land and put them both down at the same time. That is very, very specific and being addressed in their level 1 certification. You lift the limbs lightly, slightly off the floor, and you land lightly. You don't want to hit the hard ground with impact. You lift and land lightly and simultaneously. So that is the beast activation in animal flow, and now we're going to get to crab activation. So crab is simply a reverse position, right? So if I'm in beast, I'm chest facing ground, I'm loading my arms and shoulders, my quads, my core. The crab activation is the complete opposite relationship to gravity. I'm still on my hands and knees and butt and arms here, but I am open through my chest. So you're going to get a lot more loading or activation in the posterior side of your shoulders and back, right? So the beast loads more pecs in the front shoulder muscles because I'm facing forward. Crab is going to load my triceps as well, but I'm going to get more of my rear, my back deltoids, my upper mid-back muscles. I'm going to get a lot more loading in the upper body and a little bit less load in the quads in the crab activation. Again, I stay positioned. Right now, my butt is on the ground. I am in a 5 point, right? My glutes and my sit bones, feet and hands. I lift my hips, again, just a sheet of paper. I'm not lifting my hips up. That is a different movement. That is not official crab activation. I just lift my sit bones slightly off the floor. Again, for me, I'm thinking about not hyperextending my elbows, but pulling my shoulders back, my shoulder blades down. I'm packing my shoulders. I know I talked about that already, right? So I have that nice solid driving down of my arms into the ground. I'm gripping the floor. I'm doing my short foot tripod activation of my feet, toes pressing, and it's the same pattern as the beast activations. I first start out with just the pelvis off the ground and I build for time. If that is easy, I take just 1 foot off, sheet of paper. I don't want to be looking down. I want to really feel like the front of my spine is long, so I am looking slightly at an upwards angle, right? And then if that is easy, I take the hand just slightly off the floor, just one hand, right? And then the final progression. The crab activation and the beast activation are the same in their sequential pattern. First, you either lift the knees of the pelvis off, then 1 foot, then one hand, and then you would combine, right? Combine that too. So I'll show you at a slightly different angle. Right, I'm lifting up one hand and 1 foot. Again, I don't want, crab is harder to do. You don't want to be rocking and shifting in a lateral direction. Ideally, there is 0 shift. one hand, one foot. So you can see a little bit, one hand, one foot, right? So those are the activations. There's no traveling in space. You were simply trying to hone in on owning those positions, strengthening the muscles to be able to create joint stability in those isometric contraction and in that static position. So that again is the activations for beast and crab in animal flow and the beginning of many videos to follow in the animal flow series.